So, welcome to today's deep dive. We are exploring a really fascinating audio source today.
We really are.
Yeah, it's a sermon that tackles what is honestly often considered one of the most difficult passages in Scripture. And our mission for this deep dive is to unpack this radical, almost totally counterintuitive theological argument that the source presents.
Right. The core idea here is that human beings are essentially, thieves of divine grace.
Thieves, right? Which is just such a crazy way to think about it.
Exactly. We are the beneficiaries of what the speaker specifically calls anti-righteous wealth. And we're going to get into why, surprisingly, the source argues that God actually wants it this way.
Yeah, and to just tease the listener with a central paradox here, the speaker claims that the great exchange of salvation is actually kind of shady when you really stop and think about it.
Oh, highly shady.
Right, like it involves stripping merits off a corpse. That is the visceral imagery they use.
It is intensely visceral.
It totally flips that squeaky clean Sunday school narrative completely on its head. So whether you're religious or not, the rhetorical and logical moves the speaker makes here to just redefine morality and wealth and status, it's incredibly compelling.
It really is a fascinating intellectual exercise. So, to start, we have to define this foundational concept of anti-righteous wealth.
Let's do it. What exactly does the speaker mean by that?
Well, this isn't just wealth we didn't earn. It's not finding a $20 bill on the sidewalk. Anti-righteous wealth is wealth we take without building it, without gaining it rightly, or, having any personal claim to it whatsoever.
So if I'm thinking about an analogy for the listener, is this essentially like getting an A on a massive group project where you literally did zero work?
That is a perfect way to look at it, yeah.
Like you skipped the meetings, you didn't do the research, but the genius of the rest of the group just forces the professor to give you the credit anyway.
Right. You possess the A on your transcript, but the merit behind it is entirely alien to you. It belongs to someone else.
Got it. Okay, so how does the source ground this idea?
The sermon takes us into the Old Testament context, specifically the story of King David from 2 Samuel.
Right, and this is a really pivotal moment for David.
It is. David is finally back on his throne after his son Absalom's massive rebellion. The dust has settled. The path to the Messiah is safe. Everything seems secure.
You'd think he'd just coast for a bit.
You would think. But then David commits what the source calls his greatest sin.
Which is the census, right?
Exactly. He orders a census.
Now, wait. For a modern listener, counting people doesn't sound like a sin. We do it all the time. Why was this so bad according to the source?
Because in the ancient world, it wasn't just about demographics. It wasn't just counting people. David was claiming Israel's men as his own personal army.
Oh, I see. So it's about ownership.
Exactly. He declared himself the supreme commander. He was essentially stealing the title Lord of Hosts or Lord of Armies directly from Yahweh.
So he's abusing that unearned wealth, that security he was just given.
Yes, he's trying to make it self-righteous wealth. And judgment comes swiftly. The pre-incarnate Christ, showing up as the angel of the Lord, offers David 3 choices for punishment.
And those choices were famine, fleeing from enemies, or a pestilence sent by God, right?
Right. And David chooses to fall into the hands of the Lord rather than man. He chooses the pestilence.
Okay, we have to pause here because why on earth did David choose God's wrath? Knowing it is far more terrifying and complete than human armies or nature, that just seems like a terrible calculation.
It seems that way, but the expert analysis of David's dual reasoning here is brilliant. First, obviously, he knows Yahweh's merciful character.
Sure, he knows God is forgiving.
But second, and this is the crucial part, David knows God's reputation and master plan are completely on the line.
The master plan being the coming Messiah.
Exactly. The Messiah must come from this specific nation. So by throwing himself on God's mercy, David puts God in a massive bind according to his own salvation plan.
Wait, hold on. So David totally messes up, causes mass death because of his pride, and then basically manipulates God's overarching plan to save the people.
That is exactly what the sermon argues.
Is the speaker really saying David gambled with his unearned riches to force God's hand? Like a kind of spiritual blackmail?
Yes, the source uses that exact phrasing. David gambles with his unearned riches. God takes an expense to his own status and reputation to save those who absolutely do not deserve it.
That is wild. The fallout is still horrific though, right?
It is. A pestilence kills 70,000 men. Jesus, the angel of the Lord, stands ready to deal a final death blow to Jerusalem.
And that's when David falls down and banks everything on the plan.
Right. He says, these sheep, what have they done?
Wow.
The source compares this directly to the father in the prodigal son parable.
Oh, that makes sense. Because the father runs out and publicly shames himself to save his son.
Exactly. The father degrades his own status to elevate the bankrupt son. God takes the hit.
Okay, so if the Old Testament establishes that God basically allows his status to be plundered for the sake of his people, how does that translate to the New Testament?
Well, the sermon transitions beautifully here to the parable of the unjust steward in Luke.
Right, which is notoriously one of the weirdest parables Jesus ever told.
It really is. The manager gets fired for embezzlement and then goes and slashes the debts of his master's clients to make friends.
And Jesus praises him, which is, I love how the speaker excitedly unpacks this message to the Pharisees, because Jesus is essentially saying, look, if you're going to be bad, at least be bad like this.
Exactly. If you're going to rob me of my wealth and status, at least act like David in shambles.
Right. Take your unearned gains and use them to help others in accordance with my plans. That is such a fascinating read on it.
It is. And the sermon connects us right back to the prodigal son's older brother.
The one who stayed home and did all the chores.
Right. The older brother represents the Pharisees. They are legalists who stay inside the law just to get the reward. Their mindset is, I've done my time, I've done the work, now I want the exact merited reward.
They want a perfectly balanced ledger.
Exactly. And because of that, they absolutely refuse to accept an alien status freely given.
Because accepting it means admitting you didn't earn it.
Precisely. They want to hold on to mammon.
Okay, let's talk about mammon, because the source brings up a fascinating translation detail here that I think we really need to highlight for the listener.
Oh, yes, the definition of mammon.
Right, because the sermon warns against treating mammon simply as the American dollar bill. Like, we always hear it as just money.
But in the old world, wealth equaled status. It wasn't just purchasing power. It was your honor, your social standing.
So when Jesus talks about mammon, it's about the pursuit of a self-built identity.
Yes. And the expert in the sermon ties this to the epistle reading, which has all these warnings against eating, drinking, and sexual immorality.
Right, and the speaker makes this hilarious point that these aren't just, warnings about giving up a glass of Merlot at dinner or adhering to strict daily routines like making sure you shave at exactly 9 a.m.
No, treating it like a lifestyle checklist misses the point entirely. The sermon explains the cultic connection here.
Like in ancient Corinth.
Right, exactly. The warnings aren't just about bad habits. It's about rejecting cultic stuff, bowing down to other gods to gain a personal social status.
Because going to those temple feasts was basically ancient networking.
It was. And if you participate in that to build your own self-righteous status, it cuts you off from the alien status freely given by the Messiah. You can't have both.
You can't hold a ledger you balance yourself and one balanced by Jesus.
Right.
So what does this all mean for the listener today? How does the source apply this ancient, frankly, shady accounting to modern religious practice?
The sermon moves directly to the physical act of communion to explain this.
And the imagery here is it's so visceral. The pastor talks about the communion rail not as some polite ritual, but as the site of a great exchange.
A great exchange, yes.
Like the pastor is passing out treasures that just strike away debt. You walk up, you hand over your massive tally of sins, and it's just crossed out and replaced with perfectly worthy.
You strip off your filthy rags, and you drink down the innocent blood of Jesus, casting away your well-earned death.
And the expert highlights what is probably the most provocative point of the whole sermon here. This exchange is shady.
Highly shady. The source is very explicit. Someone else does all the work, and the reward becomes yours. You are thieving criminals and rebels at every turn.
It's basically cooking the books.
Yes, and the source demands that listeners stop trying to whitewash the situation. We love to pretend we are basically good people who just need a little boost.
Right, a little self-improvement.
But the sermon says, no, you are not squeaky clean, and Christ absolutely knows it.
But, I have to point out the incredible freedom the sermon finds in this admission.
Oh, absolutely.
Because if the wealth is unrighteous and totally unearned, you are actually free to use it shrewdly in your own office and vocation. You don't have to go out and literally steal stuff from a bazaar to give to the poor.
No, you use the legitimate managerial status you have right now.
Right. You care for your neighbors, using whatever unearned grace you've been handed.
You plunder the master's wealth to make friends for the kingdom.
It's just so brilliant. But I want to go back to that striking image the source used earlier. The idea of taking the fruit hanging on the tree of life and stripping all value and destiny from the merits of the corpse of Christ hanging bloody on the tree.
It is a shocking metaphor.
It really is. It forces you to look at the sheer violent cost of this grace. You are literally pulling your status off a casualty.
You inherit the estate of a rich man who paid the ultimate bill, which perfectly sets up the ultimate application presented in the text, the deathbed test.
Right. The sermon summarizes this by saying a day is coming, whether it's years from now or very soon, when all mammons and self-built statuses will completely fail.
When the bill comes due and you know you can't pay it.
And the angel of the Lord shows up with a sword of wrath.
In that moment, the sermon advises the listener not to point to their good deeds or their clean living. The advice is to desperately cling to what you have plundered from Jesus on the cross.
Bank entirely on his character. Just plunder the rich man.
Exactly, because this shrewdness, this utter reliance on anti-righteous wealth is what the sermon promises will actually be rewarded with eternal co-rulership.
It's just an incredible paradigm shift. And, it leaves me with this final provocative thought for you, the listener, to mull over.
Go for it.
If ultimate moral success actually requires us to completely abandon the idea of earning our status, right?
Right.
And instead, it forces us to accept our role as literal thieves of grace. How does that fundamentally rewrite the way we view our own daily achievements?
Oh, that's a great question.
I mean, how does it change our pride and how we view the people around us who we are usually so quick to judge? We are so obsessed with strict meritocracy in our human justice systems. We want people to get exactly what they deserve. But if the universe is ultimately governed by a ledger that intentionally cooks the books in favor of the bankrupt, maybe our obsession with strict fairness is actually working against a higher moral order.
Something to really think about.
Definitely. Something to chew on the next time you demand that someone pays exactly what they owe.